And we're breaking into the coverage right now for breaking news. We have a juror question, you guys. This is a breaking update. And I think that's the beauty of the live stream that we have here. I am live in the Southern District of Manhattan with the courthouse here behind me. And kind of what we have as our setup is we have our camera ready, our lights going. Elizabeth Milner and I are sitting here waiting for any updates. Elizabeth gets the notification. Okay, we've got an update from the courtroom. She runs in there. I hop in front of the camera so we can bring you the latest. And that's just what I'm doing now. So here's what we have from the courtroom behind me. This is according to Maureen Comey. She says that the jury is asking for transcripts from 2 witnesses. And Maureen Comey, of course, is the lead prosecutor for the government. So it sounds like just about 7 hours, a little bit past worth of deliberations. And we now have another question from the jury asking for 2 transcripts of witness testimony. I've got a lot of questions, and I bet you guys do too. So if you have them, make sure to write them and send them into the chat there, and we'll get to as many as we can because, of course, we want to know what's happening. And the good news about Law and Crime is that we come prepared, right? So I'm ready to go live, and we have our studio live too, actually, with our lead legal counsel. So let's bring her in right now. This is Elizabeth Zulai. I bet you Law and Crime viewers remember her. She's been on a lot. Elizabeth, thank you for coming on at the drop of a hat to make sense of all of this with us. So what are you thinking, Elizabeth? These jurors want transcripts from 2 witnesses. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so it's not surprising. I mean, again, you think about the mountains of evidence that the jurors have to go through, you know, all of the witness testimony. We're talking about multiple weeks of testimony here. So the fact that they want to be able to go back and look at certain transcripts, it's not surprising. Again, from the very first week, we saw multiple witnesses, you know, former victims of Combs, people that witnessed, you know, allegedly things happening between him and Cassie and other people. You know, so there's a variety of things that they've listened to at this trial. So the fact that they want to go back and be able to, you know, look through, unfortunately, we don't know, you know, which witnesses, we don't know what they're looking at, but it does make sense. And again, the amount of responsibility that they have on their hands, you know, if he's fully convicted, he could face up to the rest of his life in prison. So they've got a really, really weighty decision on their hands. So it's not surprising they want to go back and, you know, ask for certain things. I think we'll continue to see that.
I think you're right, and it shows that the jurors are taking their job seriously because, to your point, this is about 2 months that they've been hearing testimony from witness after witness, seeing text messages or videos or photos, and it's a lot. I mean, we overall here remember the highlights, right? Of course, Cassie, Jane, and Mia, but there were so many other witnesses that the government also felt were important enough to call during all of this. And again, to your point, Elizabeth, we don't know exactly which witnesses these jurors were questioning or wanting the transcripts from. I know in my mind who I would guess. Could you venture a guess who you think they want the testimony from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough to speculate. I would imagine that they might want to get testimony from some of the former victims, possibly Cassandra Ventura, because in my opinion, she really was the strongest witness when it came to testifying as to all the different levels of charges against Combs. So again, everything from the racketeering to the trafficking, you know, all of the alleged drug charges and everything in between. So, and she testified for a long time, you know, with cross-examination and her testimony, she was up there, I believe, for about a week. So it wouldn't surprise me if they want to pull something from her, possibly, you know, maybe from one of the former escorts who alleges that, you know, he engaged in these freak-offs with Cassandra Ventura. It could also be that they might want to pull from some of the other alleged victims who testified against Combs as well. They didn't testify for quite as long as Cassie, so it could be something like that. That would be my guess, is probably one of the victims, because again, they have the most allegedly, you know, firsthand knowledge of what's going on or what happened.
That's where my mind went to, Elizabeth, especially because we've had these people on, to your point, multiple days. I mean, Cassie was on probably the most, but Mia and Jane, their testimony and their cross-exam, you know, direct and cross, was pretty lengthy. And so, of course, they're going to remember the highlights, they, meaning the jurors, but I'm sure there are specifications in the transcripts that they're going to want to kind of hone in. And I'm also wondering, by the way, we do have some viewer questions, and I'll get to them in a second, but I have another question for Elizabeth myself. I'm wondering, does this show us anything about deliberations, perhaps where they are in terms of reaching a verdict or what they could be discussing?
Yeah, it's difficult to say for sure, but I think it's, I don't think it's that at the very beginning stages of deliberation, right? They started yesterday officially, early in the day yesterday. They got the judge's instructions. They had a whole day. So I think it seems like they used that day to their advantage and discussed all of the different charges. And the fact that they're asking already for copies of the transcripts means that they want to double check things. I think it also, to me, it seems like they might already have a decision somewhat made up in their minds, at least some of them. So they want to really double check to make sure the evidence that they think is there was actually there. To me, it could also be an indication of possible disagreement. Maybe some of the jurors think one way, some of the other jurors think the other way, and they want to be able to really cross-reference the transcripts to see, can we come to some sort of unanimous verdict here? So I think it could be either one of those.
I mean, we all just want to be a fly on the wall of the deliberation room, right? There are so many different options of what all of this could mean. And I do want to go now to some of our viewer questions because we do have a couple of really good ones. This one is from Michelle S. Kennedy. Here's what she says. Question. If it goes to retrial, can prosecutors go after different charges or use different witnesses? Thanks for all you do. Your trial coverage has been great. Thank you, Michelle, for watching, and all of you who have been sending us such positive messages. We love to hear that. So, Elizabeth, I'm going to shoot that one over to you. What happens if there's a retrial?
That's right. So retrial is basically the prosecutors get to do the trial all over again. So they get to put forward the same witnesses, the same evidence, same charges, but they have an opportunity to make changes. And we've seen that happen in other cases in the past, the Menendez case, for example. Having a retrial doesn't exactly mean that you can do the exact same thing. They could try to push for the same witnesses and same charges, but, you're not 100% sure if it's going to be an exact repeat. So there might be certain witnesses that they can't put on if there's a retrial. There might be additional witnesses or additional evidence that they could put on. The benefit of a retrial, even though it's an arduous process, is the prosecutors have more time to uncover more possible details. So they could go after the same charges. It all just depends on what the judge says, and they could try to push for additional evidence, less evidence. They have an opportunity to maybe learn from what they did the first time. It just depends on what the judge will allow, because again, we've seen in cases prior, again, mentioning the Menendez case, where the judge ruled out a lot of evidence the second time around. So they could try to push for the same charges and same trial, but it just depends on the judge.
And again, we are jumping ahead if we're talking about a retrial. It's a possibility. We just saw this in Karen Reed. I'm sure a lot of our viewers who are watching now were watching the live stream there, and we did see it. So it is possible. Also in the Harvey Weinstein case, we saw a mixed verdict, right? We saw that one was a hung jury. So it is possible to have a retrial. But again, we're still in deliberations, a bit over 7 hours now. And I do have another update for you from the courtroom as Agnifilo, Shapiro, Steele, and Westmoreland huddle. By the way, these are all defense attorneys. As they huddle back by gallery, AUSA Comey turns and confirms with Combs' Xavier Donaldson seated in the middle table. Door to holding cell half opens. U.S. Marshal checking to see if it's time to bring Sean Combs out. Eventually, Sean Combs has now been brought out, and his lead lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, is talking with him. Shapiro and Westmoreland are working together on something on Shapiro's laptop. So it seems like everyone is involved here. And Elizabeth, I'm going to toss to you for this next question about all of it too. As far as Diddy being included in all of this, I know I was asking our reporter, Elizabeth Milner. That's kind of what we say here at Law&Crime. Reporter Elizabeth or lawyer Elizabeth. So including both of you in this. I was asking reporter Elizabeth, where is Diddy during all of this, as we're waiting during deliberations? And she says he is in a holding cell nearby, but whenever there's anything, we got to bring him back out and make sure that he's included. Is that right, lawyer Elizabeth?
Right, that's correct. So let's say if there was any sort of question that was brought forward by the jury, if there's any sort of sidebar, like we call it, not the sidebar with Jesse Weber, but sidebar meaning conversations between both sides of counsel and the judge, then he has the right to be there. Again, this is his case. He has the right to representation and to a fair trial. So that's typically when they would bring him out. I did get a little excited when you mentioned that they were bringing him out, because I thought, could they have a possible verdict already? It's still kind of a little bit early. It's only the second day. So I'd be surprised if they came up with something this fast. But yes, so basically anytime there's any sort of conferring with the judge and counsel, he would be brought in because he has the right to know, obviously, what's going on with his case.
It's so funny. Whenever we get an update, initially what it says is that the jurors have a note. And so immediately everyone's like, okay, is it a verdict? Is it go time? What is it? And then, of course, we learn maybe 20 minutes later what it actually is. But you're right, Elizabeth. We all want to know what is going on with the jurors. And I know that our viewers want to know, too. For those of you just tuning in, make sure to send us any of your questions into the chat. We've gotten some really good ones so far. This one is from Carrie RD. What is verdict watch? And this is a quick explainer I can just give. Right now we're in verdict watch, meaning that the jury is in deliberations. They're talking, conferring about whatever they may be discussing that we may or may never know about. And so right now we're watching and waiting for a verdict. And that's why we're doing this live coverage, because throughout verdict watch, there are updates such as this. Right now the jurors want a couple of transcripts from prior testimony. And so we're here to give you updates. It could kind of give us a clue as to what way perhaps jurors are thinking. Are they close to wrapping up deliberation? Is there a hung jury? I mean, there's so many different options. So that's what Verdict Watch is. And welcome to Law&Crime's Verdict Watch. We're happy to have you here. I have another question. This one is from Jesse Davin. Question: does the court reporter read back the testimony in a monotone voice? How do they review testimony? I think it depends on the court reporter. Elizabeth, what is your experience?
It depends on the court reporter, but also what happens every single day of trial is that the court, and God bless the court reporters out there because it's not an easy job, but basically they're responsible for transcribing everything that happens each day of trial. And at the end of trial, they have to prepare that transcript, right? And it's disseminated, obviously it's disseminated amongst some members of the media, counsel gets a copy. So each day you get a copy of that transcript. So thankfully, if the judges want to go back and look at pieces of testimony, they have that there and they don't necessarily have to go to the court reporter. If they wish to do so, then she can, but it would probably be a lot easier if they could just ask for references from the trial transcript, and that's why we have amazing court reporters. That's really their job.
Oh, I'm so thankful for court reporters all over, specifically in this case, because it is a federal trial. So unfortunately, we can't live stream what's going on inside the courtroom. Obviously, in any sort of court situation, we can't live stream what's going on as far as deliberations, but in other trials in some states we can live stream all of the testimony, the openings and closings. We do it right here on Law&Crime. The difference with this case, however, is that it's federal, so there are simply no cameras allowed in the courtroom. And that's also why I've been so thankful for these court reporters, because we get the transcripts every night about 2 hours after court, and generally I break them down on my show Scandal, which if you're interested in P. Diddy or any sort of true crime, celebrity gossip, things like that, make sure to subscribe, because we talk about all things Diddy, all things celebrity, and really I do rely a lot on those transcripts because there's only so much a person can remember, a reporter can remember. I mean, we're talking 8 hours of testimony per day. The transcripts are really the tell-all, and I do think that's important for jurors to be able to go back because our memories don't, recall every single second of it. Again, I could just talk about the transcripts for days. I love them. I do have another viewer question, though, and this one is from Sydney Sexton. She says, question: while the jurors deliberated, is it just the jurors present, or is there a court clerk, a bailiff monitoring the process? This is a great question, Sydney. Elizabeth, can you explain it?
It's a great question. So typically they do have some sort of bailiff or court reporter that's available to assist them with whatever they need. Typically, and the way that it should work is in that jury deliberation room, which we've all seen photos of. And like you said, Sierra, we all wish we could be a fly on that wall. But typically what happens is that the jurors are left alone to be able to deliberate. And the reason behind that is that they are the ones that are entrusted with making this decision, that they should have the privacy and the ability to talk about the issues that the trial presented openly, so that there's no judgment and they can try to come to a verdict. And again, this is not like a civil trial where civil trial, you don't necessarily need a unanimous verdict. The judge had told them you need an unanimous verdict here. Like I said, they're, have a really big decision on their hands. If he's convicted on all charges, he could go to jail for the rest of his life. So they want to be able to have that privacy to deliberate. But of course, there are bailiffs and court officers outside the rooms that can assist with whatever they might need.
The deliberation process, I can't talk about it enough, how important it is. It encapsulates the entire trial, and so much of it is going to be going back to the government's case. Because of course, the defense, yes, we heard from them on their openings, their closings, cross-exam. I can't say enough about the cross-exam. They were there and they were coming in hot and heavy for a lot of that cross. However, they didn't put on a traditional case, one that we might normally expect. The defense didn't call any witnesses. It wasn't, again, again, what we would normally expect. And so I have to remind our viewers, and I know that the judge reminded this to the jurors too, the burden of proof rests on the government. It's not the defense. They are allowed to not call a single witness and say, okay, innocent until proven guilty. The burden is on the government. And I know that's sometimes hard to explain, Elizabeth, but how important is it for the jurors to understand that?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's really important. And one of the things that the judges had instructed the jury when they were off to start making their deliberations was, Combs did not take the stand and he was not required to take the stand. This is a criminal case. It's not a civil case where he'd be mandated to do that. And the fact that he didn't take the stand, it shouldn't be used against him, or the jury shouldn't take that to mean, any evidence of culpability or anything like that. And I thought that was a really important reminder from the judge because, again, that's a right that's protected. Under the Constitution, you have the right to protect yourself from self-incrimination, meaning if you don't want to take the stand in a criminal case, you don't have to. So the fact that the judge had made that instruction to the jury, I think he really wanted to ride home the point that it's the prosecution's burden. The fact that he didn't take the stand, it shouldn't be used against him, which I wasn't surprised that he didn't take the stand. I was surprised that the defense didn't put on any witnesses of their own. I think there's could be a lot of reasons for that. They didn't maybe want to subject their witnesses to cross-examination. They might have saw that there was an uphill battle with some of the witnesses there. Who could they really produce that they could say would be an unbiased witness that could testify as to his good character? So there's all reasons for that, but it's really important to keep that in mind, and that's why I think the judge sent the jury starting off deliberations with that reminder.
There are so many things that the jurors are juggling, right? They have to remember, okay, we can't hold it against P. Diddy, Sean Combs, the defendant, because he didn't take the stand and testify. We can't hold it against the defense because they didn't call any other witness besides Diddy. They've got to think about the burden of proof. They've got to go through and look at all the predicate crimes involving RICO. We're talking bribery. We're talking kidnapping. There's so many things that they have to weigh, least of all the fact that we're 2 months into this case and they're trying to remember it all. So for those of you who are just joining us right now, we're breaking in for live coverage, a breaking update that the jurors have asked a question. We're about 7.5 hours into deliberation, and their question is, we would like the transcripts from 2 of the witnesses. Now, the question mark is which witnesses? Not sure, but I do have another update from the court. So AUSA Emily Johnson has now gone back and handed a piece of paper over to Sean Combs' lawyers. So that's the government handing a piece of paper over to the defense. AUSA Maureen Comey goes and sits next to Combs' Xavier Donaldson and shows him something on her laptop. So that's kind of where we're at right now, that both sides are talking about this. Sean Combs is in the courtroom behind me because we are live in the Southern District of Manhattan. So, Elizabeth, what are you thinking with both sides conferring like this? It is interesting for me to see the prosecution and the defense kind of talking and chatting together because, of course, they're opposed sides. But what do you think is happening? Can you make sense of all of this with them discussing and handing notes back and forth to each other?
Yeah, it's interesting. So what I'm guessing is that there's a possibility that the jury is asking for further information. If it's just specific pages of trial transcripts that they want to look through, I don't think the counsel would need to be actively involved in that. They could just produce the transcripts. But if it's specific evidence, one of the things that they had asked for was possible evidence of the drug distribution. That goes to the racketeering aspect. So if it's, if you're having jurors that are saying we need this X page of the transcript, you wouldn't really need probably that much conferral from the counsel. But I think because they're asking for maybe a bit more general information about the drug charges, drug distribution, that could be the reason why the attorneys are conferring and figuring out, okay, what information do they exactly need? What can we give them? And which makes sense because whatever information you provide the jurors, both sides need to be appraised of it, need to understand what's going on, so that, there's not any potential argument that they're being given information that could be skewed one way or the other. So I think that could possibly be why there's so much back and forth between the attorneys. Maybe it's a more sort of general question that the jurors are asking. And we've seen that come up. Again, they've asked for information about the drug charges, and that goes more towards the racketeering case.
Yeah, and we can talk about the other questions too, because this is not the first juror question we've had so far. This seems like a very active jury, if you were asking me, I would say they're definitely talking through some of the issues, which is a positive thing, right? We're at almost 7.5 hours of deliberation that we have going here, and they do have a lot of questions. So I think you made a good point, Elizabeth, about this open dialogue. And we do have some more questions, by the way, from our viewers. So this is a great question. Spencenable says, why no cameras inside the court? And it's interesting, those of you who have been following along, our girl Anjanette Levy asked me this question yesterday, and I said, I don't know. I mean, all I know is that federal courts don't allow it, but I don't know the answer to that. Why? I should have asked a question. And so thankfully, our producers, Alex and Jordan, have sent me a response. It sounds like the federal rule of Criminal Procedure 53. Now, this rule prohibits photography or broadcasting of judicial proceedings in criminal cases. And I mean, this is true, something that we've seen. Some states don't even allow cameras at all, including New York, where I am right now. So even if it's a state case separate from federal, they don't allow cameras. Now, other states, like my home state of Wisconsin, they allow cameras streaming all the time, you know, depending on the trial. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Really good question, though, and I'm glad I'm educating myself. I'm learning with you guys throughout all of this, right? Now, another one of our questions from our viewers, Kenny Alexandra, she asks, what would be the worst case scenario if found guilty on any charge? And that would be life in prison. I mean, what do you think, Elizabeth? That's right. The top charge, the worst he could face is life behind bars, right?
That's right, yeah. And keep in mind also, it's hard to imagine because he just has always sort of had this more youthful kind of partying persona, but Sean Combs is in his 50s. He might be 55, don't quote me on the exact age, but yeah, exactly. So if he's convicted on these charges with that amount of time and where he's at in his life, he could face the rest of his life in prison. You know, so that would be the worst case scenario. Some might say the worst case scenario could also be a potential retrial because, you know, having to have prosecutors and defense attorneys and even Sean Combs go through all of this a second time. That's just a nightmare situation for any court case. You know, prosecutors want to be able to nail this, hopefully on the first try. So it could also be worst case scenario for Sean Combs is facing the rest of his life in prison. Worst case scenario possibly for some of the other people involved is that this has to go to a retrial, which again is very preliminary. There's no evidence that that's going to happen. It's just, you know, it's always a slight possibility in cases like this.